All right, we were just about to add some frames because we're easing where the word first appears, starting right along where the label is for easing, starts to come in there, but we want to see it for a full second before we start to see other stuff. So if we just swipe across the whole length of here and then F5 10 times, that should take care of that part of it. So now hopefully what we've done here makes a little bit more second. We're essentially adding 1 second into our video, which meant we had to push all this down, and then we need to, so that we can actually see something fade out here, we need to extend this part another 10 frames. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there we go. So we should see this start to disappear. And just as our square over the top becomes fully opaque, things are shifting behind the scenes. We can no longer see it because we have this block turned on. But if we were to turn it off for a second, we would see that that's the exact point that it goes from there to there. And then with that back on, as it goes away, we come up to easing, and then we're left with easing for 1 full second. And then just for housekeeping purposes, we'll go ahead and cut off this little bit that got made here with the Shift F5. Okay, now here's something for you to think about. We just performed this task of making this simple animation here, and then we realize that we need the same thing here, and we're probably going to need it a couple more times for the other topics that we're going to introduce. So start to think about what you think could be the most efficient way of accomplishing that. So one thing that you might be thinking is, well, we could grab this whole entire animation chunk and copy and paste it or drag it with the Option key down to where we need it. But how about if you think even bigger than that and think about saving computer resources? Here's a big hint and something to refresh your memory on this is, remember when we made the craft, and I'm going to double click here to take into editing mode, we decided to take advantage of the fact that we could have this light blink on and blink off, so that when this continuously loops, it just looks like that light's blinking on and off. So in other words, symbols can have their own timeline. So you might be thinking, well, yeah, that would have been great if we would have thought of that ahead of time, and as soon as we made that little piece into a symbol, we went inside and animated it. Well, we don't have to do that. But just as a refresher, so don't actually do this, just watch me do this. I'm going to do it very quick. It's going to be kind of a reminder of maybe what we did with the craft, but also showing you other ways that you can work. So way number one that you could work is you realize that you indeed need a thing like this that fades in and fades out. So I'm going to do this, but I'm going to end up deleting it. But let's say right off the bat you realize, okay, yeah, I would like something like that. And keeping in mind that we can resize it. It doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. So we have this here. We click on it. We do a F8. We turn it into a graphic symbol. And I'm just going to call this temp because I am going to delete it. And then I go into temp to edit it. And I realize that that is it right there. Now here's the odd thing is right now that's a shape. You might be thinking, how can it be a shape when I turned it into a symbol? Well, back on the main timeline, it is indeed a symbol. And if we click on it and we go into properties, we see that right here, it is a symbol. It's a graphic. That's the type of symbol that it is. But if we actually get into edit mode of it, once we're inside of its own timeline, it's whatever it is. Now you may have to stop and think about that for a second. We're talking about movies inside of movies now, you know, symbols inside of symbols. So when we go into this symbol, and we click on the piece that makes up this symbol and we go into properties, it tells us that it's a shape. So if we want to perform a tween on here, really, and not just really, but always, we should convert this to a symbol. So with it selected, I'm going to go F8, and I'm going to call this temp2 the actual symbol piece, giving it a real long name just so that as you follow along with me, you can see what I'm doing here. Now I'll go ahead and I'll make that tweenage with it. So I will go, properties. I will go into the color effect. I'll crank its alpha down to 0. I'll go out to frame 10, do a F6, go out to frame 20, do an F6, and if you remember, all that happens is that when it gets to the middle, its alpha comes back up to 100%, and then we just need to click here, shift click here, right click, and do create classic tween. So now we've created inside this symbol exactly what we did outside of it. And if we look in the library, we have temp, which is the actual thing that fades in and out, the entirety of it, and then we have temp2, which is the little symbol that we created inside of there, which does nothing, right? It's just that we have 3 instances of temp2 inside of temp, right? There's instance 1 there, there's instance 2 there, and there's instance 3 there. It's kind of mind-boggling, I know, but I think if you just follow along with me and then start experimenting on your own, you'll get there. Everybody has in the past, and no reason why you can't get there. Now, before I delete that and show you that just because we came up with something on the main timeline doesn't mean that we wasted time. But first, let's just try this thing out, make sure that it works. So what I'll do is I'll just put an instance of it right here as this this text is showing up right here. What I'm going to do, and again, you're not joining me on this, I'm just going to put a copy of this on the fade. So I want to go to temp, drag out an instance of it, and I'll purposely keep it small. In fact, I'll go even smaller with it and just have it kind of sitting there in the middle. Now I'm going to preview the video, and I want you to see what that does. So as soon as I click here, which makes it play, we'll see there was that little piece that just faded in and out. Okay, so now I'm going to get rid of all that, and then you're going to join me here. So I did a Command Z a couple times just to get rid of that. I'm going to go into the library, click on my temp and my temp2, hit the trash can, and they're gone. So imagine yourself working in the future and you come up with something pretty brilliant out here on the main timeline, and it could be just one layer like we have here, or it could be several layers, but you say, you know what, I really like this. In our case, it's just a simple, fade in and fade out, but you could say that could be something that I could put to use as a symbol. Well, here's how easy it is to do this. Instead of copying the entity, so this is what you can't do, is just click on it here and then simply do an F8, because that's for just converting something to a symbol. This is already its own animation. So what we're trying to do is convert an animation into a symbol. The way we're going to do this, and you'll probably find yourself doing this enough in the future that you'll want to write these steps down. So first step is to go insert and then new symbol, or just remember that it's Command F8. It's F8 if you select something and you want to convert it to a symbol, but if you want to make a symbol right from scratch, you just go insert, new symbol. Give it a name, so we'll call this, even though we called the other one fades, we'll call this fades, I'll call it reuse, because this fades really is just the chunk that we started animating. So we got fades reuse. We're going to make it as a graphic. We're going to click OK. Now something shows up in the library here. In fact, when you do insert new symbol, it immediately takes you right into the timeline for that symbol. I'm going to go back outside of it just for a second, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy this entire animation. So when you're copying an entire animation, it's not just simply Command C. You actually have to get out a menu item to do this. So I'm going to click on the first frame, shift click on the last frame. I'm going to put my mouse over the top of what I've just done, and I'm going to now right click, and I'm going to select. You have a choice here. You can either cut the frames or you can copy the frames if you're worried about something happening in the meantime. To me, what makes the most sense is just do a file save and then come in and cut the frames, just in case the power goes out now. This way you still have it on your clipboard, and if the power goes out, you have the file saved. Now we're going to go into that symbol that we just made. So we'll click here to make it highlight, and then we'll double click here to bring us into its mode or into its timeline. We'll click on the first frame. We will then right click, and we will say paste frames. We now have that as a reusable symbol in our library. We'll come back out to the main scene by clicking the breadcrumbs here, or the arrow there. Now let's place an instance of that symbol that we created. So I believe it should go right here at the start of easing. No, actually it should probably go about a half second earlier, right? But we'll figure that out one step at a time. So let's go to the fades layer. Let's do F7. Yep, F7, and then let's go ahead and bring out this fade reuse. And we'll place this so that it covers up our stage adequately. Now, the thing that you have to remember, in fact, I'll just place the cursor here, and then I'll hit the play button, and you'll be able to see what it does. It's fading out, but it keeps fading in and out. That symbol will keep repeating and repeating and repeating as long as there is a place for it to keep repeating. So right there, it's going to disappear because for some reason there must have been something out here that caused mine to go out there. Yours may not have, but if you want to see that, just go ahead, come out here, do a F5, extend that as far as you want, and you'll see that that symbol keeps repeating. Now we don't want that. We just want it to do one iteration, right? Which if we go into the symbol, we'll see that that iteration is from 1 frame to 22 frames. We got a little bit sloppy on it, but who cares, right? The animation is not about time, it's about what looks good. So as long as we know that it occupies 22 frames, then all we have to do is come back to the main timeline, go to where we place that under fades, and then do a little math, or 110 plus 22 takes us out to about 132. And so we'll let 132 be the last frame. We'll click on the very next one, 133. We'll do an F7. So now that there's no place for that to reoccur, it can't happen. It can only happen as long as we extend the frame that it started on. Now the only problem is it should start a half second earlier. That's super easy to fix. So we'll just come over here and we'll say a half second at 20 frames per second is just 10 frames, so we should bring this back to about frame 20. So I'll click on the first, shift click on the last, drag back about 10, and it looks like that's going to be perfect. So now we can go ahead and use that symbol again where we need the next transition to go into masking. Now we're going to have to make room for it again, but why don't we just go ahead, grab it, well first make a place for it. So we'll go on the fades layer, we'll do an F7, and we'll drag out an instance of it. And it looks like I placed that pretty good. Since we know it only lasts, or we only want it to last 22 frames, we'll do the math again, come out here onto the 23rd frame and do an F7. Next we need to grab this chunk here, move it back. I'm going to click all the way out to this F7, the blank keyframe as well, because if I don't, what'll happen is it'll just end up stretching this animation, and then I'll have to come back out here and with some F5s or clicking this frame and moving it back.